Cool. So we are now live. I wanted to quickly just thank you for the hospitality that you guys showed us when you guys were at OR here in Salt Lake a couple months ago. It was really awesome to meet everybody, and I think um, that kind of I resonated with in the Guayaki story, and so that's kind of why I wanted to have you on the show and just talk a little bit about how you got to where you are and kind of the how did you guys end up starting the company Guayaki in the first place? It was with you and your brother, correct?
Well, actually, yeah, my soul brother, more like I do work with my brother, Steven, who's one of the original 5 founders, but the original 2 people, myself and another gentleman is Alejandro. He's Argentine, and I refer to him more as my soul brother. He's been a big influence in my life, and I met Alex at university in San Luis Obispo, and after we first met, he invited me out to a ranch where he had a trailer parked, where he was doing some organic farming studies for a large landowner there, and we shared mate, and that's where it all began, out of a traditional mate gourd. He extended me the hospitality of a gourd, and I had, it hit me like a ton of bricks, literally.
So how did you kind of end up getting involved in mate in the first place? Like, how did that meeting kind of come about?
Well, it's very characteristic of what happens to people in the food and beverage industry. Is generally like the founders have a pretty strong connection to the product, and the same thing happened to me. I was no exception. When Alex shared mate with me that first time, I felt tremendous healing effects from the mate. I was someone who suffered from allergies growing up as a kid, from early years of my life having humidifiers in my room, to then going on like an intensive 10+ year regimen of getting shots in my arm every other week and every other 2 weeks to deal with all the hay fever. Growing up in California, I suffered from hay fever most of my life, and then after all that, I ended up taking the drugs like Sudafed and Benadryl to combat everything, and I finally just gave up on that because it just made me feel so bad. And I really got into the only thing that really ever relieved my hay fever, made me feel good, was extreme athletic sports. So I was really into mountain biking and surfing, and I would get that a clear head from extreme exercise. And when I started drinking mate with Alex, that first time, I experienced that same kind of feeling of when I drank a gourd. It was like it was that strong hit of the mate in my body relieved my hay fever, and I'd stop sneezing. I could breathe again. It wasn't like 100%, but it was dramatic and remarkable, the effects I experienced from the mate. And every time I shared a mate gourd with him and drank it, I experienced the same thing, that euphoric feeling from the mate, and the clarity of mind and the breath. And Alex would start telling me stories about how it had been used for centuries in South America as a healing plant, and how they considered it the liquid vegetable in Argentina, because the gauchos, the cowboys in Argentina, used it as like a liquid vegetable in their diet, and how the indigenous people had considered it like the drink of the gods and the most powerful rejuvenator known to man. And so I started hearing these stories about it, and was experiencing the effects just on my body myself, and was really moved by the product. And then on top of it was just hearing about the legacy of the product, how it was the base of their medicine system for these indigenous peoples, and then also how it could be grown in a sustainable way to support the rainforest without having to cut it down. You could generate money by growing it in the forest as an alternative income vehicle, and work with the indigenous people and create projects that would be good for the earth down there, and then healing products for people in North America. So I was really captivated by the whole package.
What steps did you take after you had kind of felt that healing feeling? Like, was there a period of time between introduced to mate and then when you kind of got Guayaki up and running? Like, how was that progression?
Yeah, there was, because at the time I had really wanted to stay in the central coast of California. Growing up in Silicon Valley, I didn't really want to move back to that area. It was just getting busier and busier, and I really liked just the beauty of the central coast, and I loved surfing from like Big Sur to Santa Barbara, and mountain biking. It was just a great zone. And so I had actually ended up starting a computer company with a couple of buddies in Slowtown just to stay there. And so after I met Alex, I started drinking mate, and we hung out for like a good 6 months or more, just drinking mate and surfing and hanging out. And I just ended up falling in love with the product and the whole purpose and everything that was going on with the mate more than what I was doing. So ultimately I had to unravel the project that I had started with my other friends and embark on this kind of new, foreign, somewhat crazy adventure, according to most people around me. Like, what are you doing? You're getting in business with an Argentine to sell a bitter green product that people can't even pronounce in North America. And it was like, yeah, actually I am.
Yeah, that's really cool. And it seems like there was quite a bit of, I mean, just from what you were saying there was a bit of pushback from people in general. And I think that's kind of how you always know that you're onto something that you really passionate about, is when you seem a little crazy to other people. And I've had that have happened that have been along the same line. How did you end up kind of like pushing through some of that? I don't want to call it negativity, but just those voices that kind of like to tell you to stop, or that this might not be the right way forward.
Mm-hmm. Well, as I reflect on it now, I don't know actually what was going on in my head at the time, but I realize, reflecting it now, is I actually just believed in myself. I actually felt the healing effects of the product. So no one could tell me that this product wasn't amazing. And I had just graduated university, and I had studied nutrition. I had grown up in the West Coast. Was relatively informed of all the stuff that was going on out there in health and healing and nutrition, because I was interested in it. And I was very idealistic, and still am, and believed in a better world, and believed in architecting a better business. I mean, a little bit of the backstory, which I didn't really talk about, was I had gone to business school for 3 years, and one day when I went to my finance class, I had one of my professors who I really respected, Professor Dobson, was from England. And I just remember really enjoying his class, and I think it was on international finance. And I remember learning that the United States had, the gross domestic product, our GDP, had no social or environmental costs factored into this giant calculation that basically runs economies and that we measure ourselves by worldwide. And that just seems so pointless to me at that point that I walked out of class, and I marched down to the Foreign Language Institute and said, where can I go? I want to get out of this country. I want to leave this, state. I want to leave my country. I need a fresh perspective. And I ended up taking off to Europe for 2 years. And I lived, mostly in Germany, Spain, and France, and just learned languages and connected with people and touched in with the culture over there. And when upon coming back, I had a real different sense of connection to food and community and culture, things that I really didn't grow up with in California, especially just because things that move at such a fast pace, and things are you're always on the innovation curve, and new is always cool, and et cetera. I mean, a lot of things I love about the West Coast pioneer spirit also just was missing a lot of the elements that I felt like I needed to round out my perspective. So after coming back and having a shift in my own paradigm, the fact that and I went back to university, I finished up for a couple of years, and then I basically met Alex right out of university, and I was learning about this plant that essentially was the base of their healing system for the indigenous people, and it was grown in the rainforest. It could be grown in the rainforest sustainably to generate income to support these peoples. And at the time, and still today, like 90+% of mate is not grown that way. It's grown in giant plantations where it's been deforested, and they grow it in direct sunlight, so they can get bigger yields, and often agrochemicals are applied, and it's treated like any other conventional commodity, maximum production to get the lowest price of production so you can sell it at an inexpensive price. And this whole model was the model that Alex was sharing with me was way different. Hey, we're going to grow this a premium product, and we're going to reintroduce it back into its native environment, or we're going to find it where it's already growing in its native environment. We're going to pay a fair price to the indigenous people and the small farmers to go harvest it in a sustainable way. And it's going to grow a little bit slower. It's going to cost a little bit more, but the quality of the product is going to be so much higher because the leaves thrive in their natural environment. And then we're going to sell the product to a North American market where there's this market of people who are appreciating premium products that are organic, that are grown in a sustainable way, that have a meaningful story to it. And so that was the natural products industry. And back when we started, there was just a few Whole Foods, and it wasn't a very booming industry because it was 20 years ago, but it was just starting to take off, and there was a market of people that really appreciated it. So, myself coming back to the United States, I was 25, and I saw sort of the picture of like, wow, here's a product that, in Argentina, they drink 6 times as much as they drink coffee. So it said to me that human nature, like the human being, really likes this product. And when it's available to both, when coffee and mate were available, people drank mate 6 times as much. So whether that one was better or worse didn't really matter. To me, it just signaled like this is a commodity product that people will drink. To me, it had a way better effect than coffee in that it gave me the energy and the clarity of mind, but it was also smooth, and it didn't have sort of the up and down yo-yo effects that people talk about with coffee. And it was very healthy, loaded with 24 vitamins and minerals and 15 amino acids and all kinds of antioxidants. And so it was like this healthy stimulant that could be introduced into the North American marketplace that could drive this whole new paradigm shifting business model. That is what excited me. And that's what essentially became the fuel for my passion. So I never really looked back. I didn't really, to answer your question, I never really at that point even cared what people thought of me anymore, because I believed in myself, and I was like, this is legit. This is exciting. This is the world that I want to create for myself. This is the world I want to live in. This is the kind of businesses that we need to see around us. And the only way to do things is to lead by example. I don't want to be out there and preach to people. It's always fun to be more fun and meaningful to be part of something that's real, instead of just telling people what to do. Just go and do it. So it's been a long haul to get where we're at, but it's been energizing the entire way through, because I think we all just kind of believed in something bigger than ourselves.
You were able to kind of find the middle ground between business and something that actually helped people or connected with who you are as a person in business school. And I know not only me, but a lot of the people that I was had similar experiences where they would kind of hit that wall. Hey, this isn't necessarily working for the greater good. Like, economic system works. You're kind of getting to a point where you're just growing for growth's sake, and you're not really benefiting anybody involved. So I think it's really cool that you were able to find that intersection of business and something that actually resonated with what you wanted to do and who you were as a person. Was it difficult at the beginning to try and of whatever learning you needed to kind of pick up on in order to keep the company growing? Because I'm assuming you didn't really have too much experience with the agricultural side of the business at the offset.
No, my agricultural experience was limited to a few other plants. No, it was all very much new to me.
Yeah, cool. So how did you end up kind of taking it to the next step? So you met your buddy who you realized there was this, you had kind of had, the business background to understand this is how did you start, ramping up and taking it to where you wanted it to be?
Guayaki has been a long organic process of aiming high, committing, and then just trying to figure it out. Myself and most of my original partners didn't have a lot of experience, and that, while that might have worked against us, I think it also worked in our favor because we just were driven by passion, and we were very persistent and disciplined and just super focused on something that was bigger than any one of us. That was really, I think, the gem in it all. Was it really wasn't about any one's particular ego. We had this vision in mind for this new paradigm shifting model, and we were very driven by the mission to share the product with as many people as possible and drive this new economic model forward. And so it's a lot of shifting and trying to figure out the best way to do things. But very quickly, I would say that within like a year of meeting Alex, I had a sense that we needed a solid team to take us to the next level. And so very quickly, I focused on building a North American team and brought in other partners, who were owners. And so like the original 5, I refer to as the Semillas, like the C group. We were all owners, are all owners. We were all good friends. I ended up, one of my good buddies who I went to university with, Don Miguel, we played music together, we surfed, he was just a solid guy. He's just still out there sharing mate and surfing and doing the same stuff. And, he was just stalwart in his commitment. And my brother, and then Chris, who joined the company, the 5th one to come along, still runs the company today. He's our CEO. And, all 5 of us have just stayed connected over 20 years, which is probably the most remarkable part of the Guayaki story. As it goes on in time, I realize how unique that is, that we've maintained our like brotherhood connection and our commitment to something bigger and to a vision of not selling the company, specifically creating a legacy business and something that other companies would want to model over time. So it was really on us to make it successful. So it was just out of sheer will that we made it. We didn't have much resource, funded the company with I actually ended up getting a small SBA loan from a local bank in San Luis Obispo. And then, cause I wrote a business plan, got a bank loan for $50K, and then got another bank loan for $100K. And then finally got a third one for a couple $100K. Meanwhile, we had maxed all of our credit cards, all of us. We probably had 15 to 20 credit cards that were maxed. This was the mid 90s. We started in 96, and this time we're probably maxing credit cards around 97, 98. Was they're just giving away so much credit, right? They just send you stuff in the mail, just sign your name. And so we took advantage of that, definitely cranked it. And then it was friends and families, and it just kind of went little by little. I got on the road probably 2 years in my VW bus with my brother, and just started driving to the Pacific Northwest. And then Don Miguel started traveling through Southern California. We basically would just show up in the stores and give them the product, and said we'd stand in the store and demo it and sample it until all the product was sold. And we just did that for 5 to 8 years, and traveled the country eventually. From first it was VWs, then it was RVs. Today it's actually, you've probably seen our Guayaki vans. It's really just grown out of that same model of us just having to travel, actually from being from the Central Coast of California. And we basically, because we were always in Slowtown, we always had to travel to somewhere else, to LA or to Northern California. And that kind of became a bit of the DNA of our company. And more importantly, like, it was all about hospitality, because mate was the symbol of hospitality. And so we'd always show up and set up our tables and put on some music, put out some flowers, and just make mate lattes. We didn't have cans or bottles back then. We had to brew up every single cup and craft it. And that was sort of the extension of the hospitality that we felt. We felt like we could bring on this whole evolution that we've needed more by extending kindness and hospitality than telling people what to do. So we offer up drinks, and people would ask questions. We tell them what we're doing. But it took a lot. It was really organic. That was our rhythm for the first 5 to 8 years.
So you had mentioned too that like I think one of the things that had kind of kept you going through those initial first years of just you being on the grind and just selling over and over and over was kind of the fact that you really enjoyed doing. How did you know that that was something that you wanted to make such a priority? Because I think the reason that a lot of people can't get to where they want to be for certain projects or whatever is because of time it takes to get there, and they end up, you know, getting partway through and giving up because it's too difficult. But I think when you find something that you enjoy, like it seems like you did, that doesn't really matter anymore. It's just something you enjoy doing so much that that kind of just falls to the wayside.
Well, yeah, circumstantial too. I mean, we were all young, in our mid-20s mostly, mid to late 20s. We were single, so we didn't have families, and we could basically live like nomad gypsies. And so we lived in our vehicles. We didn't have hotel bills, and we basically ate at natural food stores. So I just expensed my life for 5 to 8 years, like just eating some food and some gas. And you know, we did have expenses for like cups and honey and brewing machines and froth-o-matics to froth up the milk or whatever silliness we are doing. But essentially, you know, we had a bunch of loose mate. We didn't have a lot else. So what else are you going to do? If you have no money, really, all you could essentially do is serve. And I think that was kind of the great lesson in it all. It's like, there will be nothing that we can ever do better as a company than to serve. And I think I think it's just a reflection of who we are as individuals. We feel that way too. It's like, we're here to serve. You know, those with privilege have the responsibility to serve others. And we felt like, you know, through service, we're going to transform. And through transformation, we can serve more. And so it became a bit of the mantra for everything we were doing was we're going to show up and we're going to serve the people a new paradigm. And those who are ready for it and who believe in it, we'll climb on board. And those who aren't, we'll just serve someone else. And we served millions of cups personally. But it takes, you know, 5 to 8 years to do that when you make them one by one.
It's like kind of more of a Buddhist understanding of living life, but intertwined with business in a way that can kind of keep things moving at its own pace without trying to force something to happen. How did you guys end up dealing with quite a bit of growing pains as things kind of slowly started to take off? You know, you had to invest in potentially more vehicles, more help. Like how do you keep the core message of what you're trying to do and the feelings that you're trying to evoke in other people? How do you keep that where you want it to be as the company gets bigger?
We did grow very slowly, really, if you think about it, over 20 years. So it was gradual growth, organic growth. It wasn't like a J curve. It was just like a slow, steady incline. And that allowed us to really maintain the culture of the company. Culture is very important. People always throw that word out there, and I'll throw it out there too. But essentially, you know, the culture of Guayaki stayed strong, just the spirit of sharing and connecting, which is at the core of everything we do. And the hospitality that is the core of Yerba Mate as a cultural beverage just stayed with us. And so, you know, with the team eventually grew and we had to add more and all this and that, but essentially it wasn't outpacing the culture of Guayaki. We were still able to nurture the one-on-one relationships that we had with each other and with the new people coming on board. And I think that was a big part of it.
How did you make sure to kind of keep the culture or the root of the actual plant itself intact? Because obviously you had to, you know, go to places that these plants are being grown in and kind of understand in order to keep that infused in the business. How did you pay homage to that and kind of make sure that that piece of the business was where you wanted it to be as well?
Well, thankfully, you know, Alex is Argentine, and you know, a couple of years in the business, we met in the United States, right? And then he moved back down to South America, literally like within 2 years, he was back down. And so he has his life and family and has built out our South American team down there and has been very close to the source. And if Alex were here, he would tell you, you know, everything we do is comes from listening to the source and observing the nature connection. And he speaks very eloquently about how much we learn from the forest itself and from the people, and that all has always been the guide. So if you look at Yerba Mate as a middle canopy rainforest tree, and that's its natural habitat, and then you look to the people who have used the product for hundreds of years and how they've prepared it and how they've grown it and how they've dried it, there's a lot there. And so I think where Alex has been very, very gifted and very, very talented with his moves and making all the right moves. He's patched together a network of the people who are the most aligned with our vision and our philosophy. So in the end, it was a lot of small farmers and indigenous people. It wasn't always like that. We had other models of working with larger farmers and bigger outfits, but in the end, we've come back to an aligned group of smaller farmers and indigenous groups because they actually depend on that nature connection. It is their life force, their life source, and they respect the natural balance and the natural flow that exists, and they know how to farm the yerba mate in the forest in a more sustainable way. They depend on it and they understand it. And so today we have a few different models. One model is working with areas where the last remnants of the Atlantic forest where mate grows still exists, and there's wild mate trees. And you can see some of these, you can see some of this on our new videos that we're just putting out, where they're actually hiking up the trees with spikes and machetes and then chopping off the branches like 30, 40, 50 feet high and harvesting wild mate. It's quite the spectacle that you can capture now with drone footage. And then we have other models where we have planted yerba mate into a forest where it wasn't as densely populated, and then we scale that out. So now we're reintroducing mate into its natural habitat and just more densely cropping it. And then the third model is going to areas where there's sun-grown mate and then transitioning it back to a forest by introducing fast-growing fruit trees and all different species of hardwoods. Again, the theme is everything that we do is couched against our business model that we define as market-driven restoration. So everything is restorative in nature, whether we're looking at the forest or we're working with a small indigenous group or small farmers. Our mantra is restoration, and all of that is driven by the market. And that's why we are trying to expand our business and reach more people and expand in other markets, because the market is actually going to drive all these processes.
And I think that's what's really cool about the kind of shift in business, I guess, or the shift in priorities that you see in people today. Food's becoming more popular and more local businesses trying to and innovate on supply chain. How do you see the doing with Guayaki in the overall kind of scope of where the world is moving? Like, do you try and kind of educate people that come into Guayaki to kind of like funnel them more toward with the farms in general, or like think about that side of things?
I'm not sure I totally understand the question. I mean, people that join Guayaki company or customers?
I guess both. Customers, I guess just people that are involved or appreciate the products that you're putting out and how you're running the business as a whole.
I feel like we have more of a build it and they will come mentality. Like, we're doing things that we believe to be right, and we're probably our own harshest critics, and we're continually improving our model. I refer to it as holistic that way, because we love our model, but there's so much more that we can be doing, and we're always trying to find ways to be smarter and more efficient and have less impact in everything we do. And so we still have a lot we can do. And we're probably falling short of communicating everything that we're doing because we spend more time on actually just trying to do the work, and really rely on our passionate customers to spread, the goodness, because maybe they understand what we're doing because they meet and talk with us, or they go deeper into what we're doing, or they've been down to visit the projects. I just think that we're kind of like the first people, some of the first people of this generation of people who got into business that really are trying to combine their personal and professional goals and not have to be a different person at work than they are at home, and really have meaningful experience, meaningful life, meaningful work. It's not too much to ask for it. I think it's how it used to be millenniums ago and centuries ago. Like, take a farmer, for example, in the simplest form. Like, you go out there and you work hard and you grow your food for your family, and then you come in and you have dinner and you have ceremony and you say grace and you sit around the table, eat a meal. I mean, that's really meaningful work, and I think we've gotten away from that. And so I think there's the pendulum swinging the other way now of young people looking at the business paradigm and, the general state of affairs, and it just not being that appealing or that desirable, myself included. Why would you want to be part of something that's, essentially a capitalistic machine, like I said in the beginning of the conversation, that's externalizing all social and environmental costs? That doesn't feel very exciting or appealing. It's not gratified on a deep level. And I think we all feel the pain and suffering on some level of people on this planet, even if it's not conscious. I think we all are connected. We have a soulful connection to every other human being, and it doesn't feel good to be part of a system that's creating more disharmony. And so I think more people are inclined to be part of a business or any type of project or collaboration that's positive and creates more good in the world. So I feel like we're just part of a bigger movement of people who are really just trying to have a broader perspective and have meaningful, purposeful existence.
Yeah, so I think along those same lines, and I completely agree with you, by the way, is there anything that you would say to somebody that's kind of trying to follow in similar footsteps in either creating a business or just trying to follow a career path that is along those same lines? Because I know there's a lot of stuff that along the way, there's a set up for people to do the things that you're doing right now, which is why I think it's so cool that everyone that's working for Guayaki has helped to push this thing forward in a way that is very understanding and accepting, and how a lot of people do business today.
Yeah, I always encourage people to follow their heart and to really touch in with what that is, what motivates them, what drives them, and to also look at what connects them to everyone else on this planet. So to essentially look beyond themselves. I think if people get involved in something that ultimately is only about them or driving themselves forward, you hit a wall eventually, and either it's successful and it just becomes mind-numbing or meaningless, and then you get kind of trapped in that existence of having created something that's actually not that beneficial to everyone. So it's, you have to ask yourself, is like, what happens when it works? And so you want to make sure that it's something that you're proud of, that you feel connected to, and is deeply moving. And then of course it's just the same old stuff. You got to be persistent. You got to be disciplined. I think a lot of people, I hear anyway, like a lot of people are expecting to have success within 2, 3, 4 years, whatever. For us, it took us 15 years really to reach profitability, to break even. And so we had to keep the faith and keep the vision for a lot of years, and keep talking to friends and family and raising money, and like, hey, we're going to do this, we're going to do this. And so it was particularly a long time for Guayaki, and I don't think it needs to be that way for everyone, because, we were and are trying to do a lot in terms of creating a whole new category and a whole new brand and a whole new business model, like 3 giant things all at once. But that was what came to us because that was part of the Yerba Mate culture and what we were trying to bring. So I just encourage people to follow their heart.
Yeah, that's really cool. I'm trying to think of like that can kind of help people follow in a similar path, because I think that's one reason why podcast in the first place was to be able to tell backstories of people like yourself and companies like the one that you've helped to create, that you are doing things differently, and that there's things that come up that are very discouraging, but that you have to kind of just keep going and keep plugging away and learning and understanding. Anything other than, it sounded like traveling was a big part of the reason to step outside of your own person and understand more of the broader whole as it relates to people that are living in this world and all the things that are going on in it.
Yeah, anything
traveling
that can your perspective, I think, is going to be useful. Really paying attention to the things that make you come to life, that when you come alive, like what are those things that do that for you? It's not always easy to know what that thing is. I felt very lucky that it happened to me at such a young age that it was so clear. Like when I drank Yerba Mate, I felt alive and I felt energized by my connection with Alex. And even though it felt kind of far out and strange and weird to most people, it was the most real thing for me. And it probably couldn't have seemed much more far out to most people. It's like I should have started a technology company growing up in the Bay Area, and I started to, and that was my path. And I had connections, and I could have made stuff happen in that whole arena, and probably would have maybe achieved a greater financial success sooner, or whatever that means. But I don't think I would have been as happy. I mean, I just stayed connected to something that was meaningful. I really, really enjoyed drinking mate and sharing mate with people. I mean, that's what I do today. And here I am talking about it. And so I'm kind of doing the same thing that I was doing back then. It's just I'm doing it with more people and different groups of people and having more fun than I've ever had doing it, because there's greater momentum. There's more of us sharing it. So it's, in the beginning, it felt kind of alone sometimes, and it definitely required a lot of courage. But like I said, I believed in myself, and I believed in the product, and I believed in the people around me. And so it was, I never looked back.
Had you ever had any sort of like experience with yoga or anything at the beginning, when you had kind of had that thing that you were talking about with connecting with mate? Because I think a lot of what we're missing in today is like that teaching of to understand more feelings and understand what that means and react to it, and because I think with
I didn't mention it, but essentially, I was really into mountain biking, surfing, and yoga. I had just started my yoga practice probably a few years before meeting Alex, and it was a big part of my life. And in terms of, I practiced more than I ever have before or since. In just I wasn't very flexible when I started yoga, and I had been, and it was a big opening for me, just getting more flexibility and opening my body and all the breath work and the lessons that come with that. So it was definitely part of my daily regimen and philosophy. But it wasn't just that. It was that combined with everything else that was going on.
Awesome. So what other steps are kind of in the future for Guayaki or yourself? What else are you looking forward to in the future? What things are going on?
Well, the same exciting things as, because our model of market-driven restoration is our business model. That means we need to expand into other markets so we can drive more restoration. So we're looking at international expansion. We're looking, of course, at growing our business domestically and really bringing Yerba Mate culture to more people in the world, because it's really, we feel the culture of Yerba Mate, the lifestyle around drinking the beverage, the choices that you make, why you make them is part of a much bigger movement. So we're really focused on all the different ways to do that.
Awesome. Yeah. I mean, cool. And I think that's one reason why I had kind of jumped on board with your product in the first place. And yeah, I think there's some really cool stuff in store. Is there anything else that you'd kind of like to say about the company, or, you know, people that might be listening?
Well, I have, you know, in the very beginning, we always said that, you know, people are always the most afraid of their own power. And I believe that. And I think that we as a people have the power to make change, you know, and with that power comes a sense of personal responsibility and personal accountability. And so every day, all of us, myself included, are making choices when we vote with our dollar. You know, it's kind of cliche, but we do really vote with our dollar. And we can complain about politics, we can complain about anything, but essentially, I believe that the dollar is running the world until we have a spontaneous, cataclysmic, conscious revolution. All of a sudden, everyone wakes up and we all see the light. Well, until that time, I believe the dollar is essentially ruling the world, and we as a people need to realize the power that comes with that and really support the industries and the people and the brands that we believe in. And so I really encourage people to look deeper into who they support and why they support and what they purchase with their dollar, because that's going to give energy and money to the corporations or the organizations, good or bad, and they're going to have the power to do what they want with it. So I feel like it is in our power to change things. And I think a lot of people realize that. And I think a lot of media does a lot to discourage people to feel powerful. And by creating a very image-based culture so that people continually feel less than or comparative or judge or whatever. But at the end of the day, I really feel like we can all make a difference by voting with our dollar and voting in the things that we want in our life and not giving energy to the things that we don't.
I completely agree, and that was very, very well said. I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me today. Hopefully we can get together again, you know, in the next couple months, year, whatever makes sense, and I can kind of figure out this stupid connection thing so we can actually have some video. That would be cool.
Sure. Anytime.
Awesome. Well, have a great rest of your day, and I'll drop you a line once we get the show up online.
Okay, cool. Awesome. I appreciate you taking the time to share the Guayaki story too.
Yeah, anytime, and right back at you.
All right, amigo. Have a good one.